Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the series premiere episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier New World Order. And I really enjoyed this episode. Now granted, I've been really looking forward to this one because Cap's one of my favorite characters, and seeing his partners Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes kind of deal with him retiring and all that kind of stuff that would fall out from that, especially what happened at the end of Endgame, really intrigued me more than WandaVision's. Even though I enjoyed WandaVision, this was more kind of up my alley. And I really got a lot that I liked of what was going on in this. I'd say you would say pilot, but the first episode usually has to have the kind of baggage of introducing you to the world and the characters. And the thing is, this is pretty interesting because we've already had these characters introduced, and this kind of deepens it more for us. So this really does a great job of doing action, character development, and plot development as well. I think it's a really well paced kind of one as well. You don't have constant action, but you get your set pieces and everything, so that way you are like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. You see superheroes being superheroes, and it's not just randomly, oh, you get thrown in, you get some context of what's going on. And then you get a little bit more background for the characters of mainly Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes in this, while also introducing a new kind of character that has been pretty much integrated in the newer comics for Captain America, mainly when Sam Wilson was Cap. So we pretty much start out with Sam getting himself dressed up and doing something with the shield, and then we're like, what the hell's going on? We then shift over and we deal with most of his stuff in this part, and evidently a Air Force dude has been kidnapped by a terrorist of a group of LAF, and they are tasking Sam with pretty much trying to get him out because they're trying to get him from Tunisian airspace to Libyan airspace for some unknown reason. We don't know exactly what's going on or what this group's motivation is, but they're trying to use Sam to do this as subtly as possible. And he's like, yeah, subtle, got it, as he then flies off in his Falcon attire and everything. So he's able to get onto the ship, and he's trying to scope everything out. They've already gotten control of the plane. He's got a person, Lieutenant Torres, as his liaison, and this is the character that's introduced that has connection with Sam when he's Captain America in the comics. Now this is kind of a radical change. Well, not a radical, but it makes it easier to understand because in the comics, Joaquin Torres was kind of late teens, early 20s, and he got experimented on and had his genes spliced with Sam's vampiric bird Redwing, and that gave him actual kind of falcon wings and stuff like that. Here, he is just the army dude, army lieutenant that is pretty much tracking Sam on the ground to kind of make sure that he doesn't do an international incident, but also give him intel support. It's okay, we're getting close to Libyan airspace, so you kind of have to back off. Well, we see that the group that is tied with LAF is Batroc, who we remember is from The Winter Soldier. So he, coming back into this, is a nice little kind of connection with that, and also showing Sam kind of dealing with the fallout of all different kind of things. And it's kind of interesting because in Winter Soldier, we see that Batroc was hijacking a boat and fought Steve Rogers, and now he is hijacking a plane and having to fight Sam Wilson. It's just a nice kind of little kind of symmetry there. So Sam kind of gets spotted, tries to figure out what to do. Batroc's pretty much trying to calm everybody down, yeah, keep that dude from flopping around. Sam's able to use Redwing to pretty much laser open the door, which granted, it should have had a little bit more suction, because he's able to get in, and they do a really good job because they follow more the Winter Soldier kind of espionage and nice attention to action scenes that came in, and we get to see Sam's fighting style, specifically utilizing his wings in a close quarters situation, and this was just really kind of cool, seeing him use it as a shield kind of thing to block bullets and to fly and jet around with his thrusters and everything. and we see that he almost is able to pretty much take everybody out, but of course Batroc comes in using his pretty much like kung fu to kind of like get Sam into a position where they're able to get themselves into pretty much wingsuits, and they strap the frickin' dude that they've kidnapped onto one of them, and they jump out. So now we get a chase sequence with Sam using his wings and everything, and them in their glider suits. And by the way, during their fight, the dude that had hijacked the plane is dead, and the plane is now on autopilot. We don't get any resolution of there's a fucking plane that is flying by itself now that could probably cause an international incident. So that's a thing. I'm just like, okay, alright, but it doesn't get away of the action scene. But then I'm like, okay, we see them like trying to get away from Sam and going into pretty much canyon kind of areas. Think of essentially like any kind of dogfight scenario that you see between two ships, mainly like Independence Day. Didn't think of that until now, but yeah, that was that one. So the thing is, they have such maneuverability with just the glider suits. If they had thrusters, I think that would have been a little bit better. Like they had stolen some Stark Tech thrusters. They didn't get like a full wingsuit or something like that, or Stark Tech like little repulsors or whatnot for them to be able to like change their altitudes and everything. But Sam has to like find him through the air while trying to get at the hostage. The thing is, it becomes a chase of they're running away from him. They're able to get into a helicopter, and then they're like, get away from him. He's like, hey guys, and he starts like fighting them, and then they jump out again from that helicopter as it then starts blowing up because Sam is tactically effective and is utilizing like little bombs and stuff that he's got to like blow them up, so that way it doesn't become an issue for him later on. And they keep kind of going around like that for a little bit as they then have another attack helicopter pretty much shooting missiles at Sam, and I'm just like, you better be careful because they're in another helicopter that would probably be a bigger heat signature unless they've got more kind of accurate targeting systems, because Sam's able to pretty much utilize them to kind of slingshot him to blow up that one and to jump through and grab the hostage. He was also utilizing Red Wing very effectively because Red Wing's a badass thing. It's got missiles on it and not a minigun, but a smaller version of a minigun that's not as powerful, but it's still able to like fuck some shit up. Because Red Wing got damaged and kind of damaged his thrusters, but he was able to kick them back in to like rescue the dude. And Batroc is able to escape even though his helicopter's blown up and they're just like close to Libyan airspace. Torres, of course, is celebrating after this. I'm like, alright. It's like, okay, nice start. Interesting way to see how your action scenes go. Well, let's kind of see how this works out. So we also split up time with what's going on with Bucky, but I'm going to focus on mostly on Sam's stuff first and then kind of like deal with Bucky's later. So him and Torres pretty much stop in Tunisia. He's pretty much trying to fix Red Wing. He offers to help because he knows some stuff with tech, and he's like, no, every time you fly boys kind of get into him, he gets kind of mucked up. It's like, alright, so I think that's kind of like hopefully maybe foreshadowing that he becomes kind of like a helpful kind of tech support, but he does investigate things on his own later in this episode. And it's kind of funny because Torres gives us some more information on the group, the Flag Smashers, and of course he's explaining that during the blip it wasn't really great, but these people want to go back to the blip and like have no borders, and they're doing their own kind of freaky stuff. It's a thing that's been going on online. He's using his phone to kind of see AR stuff for their own kind of tags, which is an interesting kind of concept, moving tagging kind of things into like augmented reality. So he's like, well, it wasn't that great, and we'll have to kind of see what their kind of whole thing is. They don't want borders and all that kind of stuff, but we'll have to see what more their manifesto is, because that sounds like an interesting concept in theory, but what are they actually going to be doing? And Torres also asked the question of Sam. He's like, alright, Steve's retired. There's this crazy theory that some people think that he is on the moon watching over us, and that Sam had flown into the moon. And Sam was like, no, he's not on the moon. But that's an interesting, funny little joke that kind of works out, because in the comic books, Nick Fury was on the moon and like watching stuff. And of course, you've got the Watchers that usually have their base on the moon watching stuff going on Earth. So that was a funny little kind of theory that they had. And of course, Sam's like, well, thanks for that. I kind of have to go to Washington. He's like, for what? Moon stuff. And a cool little tidbit thing that we got is that somebody came up to Sam and thanked him, knew he was an Avenger, and thanked him for bringing back his wife. So I really like the concept that they are actively dealing with the fallouts of what they call the Thanos' snap. That seems to be a really big kind of focus of what these stories are going to be going forward, specifically with this. So I'm like, yes, let's see that work out. So we get to Washington with Sam's story, and we see that he has decided to give the shield to the government, specifically to have it sewn at the Smithsonian. He talks about how Steve meant so much to people and so much to him, but he's like, this shield is yours, and it belongs to you, so he gave it to the U.S. government to have it displayed for what's going on. And a person that was there kind of for the whole ceremony was like Secretary of Defense, but also Rhodey. And Rhodey wanted to talk to Sam about it, and he's like, yeah, they're like walking through Cap's kind of whole thing and everything. And I did look up, and at one of the parts it was talking about how Captain America retired. So that's the official story. He's not dead or anything at this point. He's just in retirement after everything that happened in Endgame. And Rhodey, of course, comes out and be like, why didn't you take up the mantle? And he talks about how Steve gave him the shield and how he said that it felt like someone else. And he's like, it's Steve's. And I do think it's interesting that Sam has that reluctance, and that I think really works in his character, and it's kind of believable that he doesn't feel like that's his. He feels like it's Steve's. Even though he's perfectly capable of wielding the shield and being Captain America, he just doesn't feel that way at this point, and this is the decision he's made. Rhodey, of course, telling him that everything's kind of gone out of whack, and people, like, allies have become enemies, and people are just looking for somebody to help fix things. And that he's like, hey, if you ever want to bring your nephews or whatnot, I'll show them how to really fly. That was a pretty interesting little dig for Rhodey to do at Sam. And we see that pretty much Sam is contemplating everything while looking at the shield next to like an older costume for Steve. Well, he then also goes down to his hometown in LaCroix, Louisiana. I probably pronounced that horrendously. To check on his sister, and we find out that he is an Uncle Sam to his sister's sons, and I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But they have this whole like family fishing business and everything, and his sister wants to sell it, and because everything that has happened in the 5 years, the thing is, they've been through a lot of tough times, and they have to get rid of it because the boat's in pretty bad shape. But granted, Sam has half of it, and he wants to try and figure out a way to fix it. He's like, okay, you need to fix up the house. The issue is it got tied up with the mortgage with the house and everything. So Sam's like, okay, let me help you, and we'll figure out, we'll go to a bank, loan, consolidate and everything, then you'll be able to fix this up, fix up the house. He's got all these kind of plans for their whole fishing kind of thing, so it's passed down to them from their parents. And the thing is, we definitely get a lot of stuff going from the sister that, okay, you went up and did your thing, being in the, going into the military, and then, of course, doing your whole superhero thing, and I would run this my way. And she, of course, relents, and he's like, all right, cool, let's kind of go do this. And then we get the bank scene, which, dude, the dude figures out that he's Falcon, and he's like, oh, dude, I've always wanted to be an Avenger. And Sam, of course, is trying to get it back on track, being like, okay, I got government contracts, that's proof of income and everything. And the thing is, ever since the blip, everybody coming back, they're trying to figure out. And he's like, yeah, everything's kind of tightening up. And of course, his sister's like, yeah, it always tightens up around people like us. And they are denied for their loan. And I'm just like, okay. This dude got blipped out of existence for 5 years. I mean, that's got to be taken in consideration. Secondly, he has government contracts and has been working with the military. Granted, he had the falling out with the whole Sokovia Accords, and it was also brought up of Stark bankrolling the Avengers or whatnot, but of course he was on Cap's team with everything going on with Bucky and all that, so he was considered a fugitive for part of that time. And Stark probably didn't pay the Avengers, he probably paid for things, so that kind of tosses the things up. But he's got like government contracts and everything. He's a superhero. Granted, probably not one of the most well-known ones of the big ones, but he has been in a lot of stuff. He has been with Captain America and been part of a lot of different kind of campaigns before he got blown out of existence. And it's just like he also has like the contracts. I'm like, sorry, that's my business head kind of dude. And the thing is, you have to really look at the financials, and he really didn't. He even had the audacity after pretty much denying them. He's like, I have a picture of you with your arms out, and it's just like, really? Yeah, it sounds like, dude. And of course, they had their argument of what was going on. They had made food for like donating and all that, and they're trying to figure that out. Sam's like, we're gonna have to. I'll keep going throughout all this town to look for that kind of stuff, and she's just like, you don't know. You went, and I had to stay here and deal with all this kind of stuff. It's like, yep, I understand that. Like I get that kind of relationship between brother and sister. They did that very well, in my opinion. I'm like, okay, I definitely can see the different kind of friction, and of course, he's been gone for 5 years. Now, granted, this has been done 6 months after Endgame, and that puts it also after WandaVision. So they've only had 6 months to like come to terms with everything going on, and there's still problems and issues. So we also do see Sam kind of like mucking with the whole ship to try and fix the engine and everything. And of course that brings us to him linking up with another part of what's going on with Torres. Because during this time we see that Torres is in Switzerland kind of looking into the whole flag smashers kind of thing. He said he was going to look up into it online, but he actually starts following their kind of augmented reality, has another cell phone within his jacket to pretty much record what's going on. And we see that at a Swiss bank, like these bags are thrown out of nowhere, well, out of the bank, and this woman has been like handing out like masks that are like black and have this like red kind of thing on it, and everybody is told to pretty much essentially do a flash mob to screen what's going on. As we see this dude come out, gets the bags, hands them off to other people. A police dude tries to arrest him, but he uses super strength to pretty much fuck his shit up. And then Torres tries to have him under arrest after he had to kerfuffle with a police officer, and the dude just pushes his shit in and stomps on his face. That's where he kind of links up with Sam and being like, hey, Sam, this is kind of up on your kind of business because these people are super strong. Of course, showing him the things. He's like, all right, yeah, you're gonna have to watch out. And then Sam, of course, is trying to figure out what's going on. He's like, well, what happened after you kind of have got your face pushed in? He's like, I don't know, my face was in the dirt. I don't know what actually happened. So these flag smashers are going after at least money for some kind of reason. Unless it's the only reason, okay, that works. But we'll have to see kind of where their plans are. This is just kind of inkling of what's going on. So Sam's story, and of course the end of the episode ends with Sam, of course, was in the room kind of like talking with Torres via pretty much video. And then his sister comes in and look at this. And we see, of course, the Secretary of Defense dude that we had previously seen saying, dude, all the uncertainty and everything with the heroes, America needs a hero, and introduces the new Captain America, wielding the shield as well. And it's like, shit. I'm like, Of course that's how they would do it. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, thanks for coming forward with that, Sam. Now we're going to use it like anything we can. It doesn't matter that Steve's legacy is an important thing, and you want to have a person that would carry on that legacy well, since we don't know who this person is. Of course, this follows more of what's gone on in comics of the U.S. government instituting new kind of Captain Americas as well. And this, of course, is John Walker. We don't know that at this point, but he becomes U.S. agent. So it'll be interesting to see, because U.S. agent starts off antagonistic in certain respects. We'll have to see if that's the way they go, but he might be not as dickish, depending upon what goes on, because I know that him and Sam will probably clash, because he's like that should be in a. And granted, he would almost do the Indiana Jones line the same way I would. That belongs in a museum with the shield, and we'll kind of have to see how that works out. If they'll both be Captain America, or, of course, if Walker will take another identity, or if Sam will take up Captain America or stay as Falcon. We'll have to kind of see how that kind of shakes out. So that's where his stuff and the episode ends. We also see that Bucky is dealing with a lot of stuff. The first kind of instance that we see is that essentially a flashback. We see these guys going around in this hotel. This one dude's like, hey, I got an early... I can't stay out too late. I got to deal with my stuff for this whole conference thing. See you guys. And then we see this one dude walking with guards, and then out of nowhere, an arm busts through the wall, and we see it's the Winter Soldier. And, of course, since it is a silver kind of arm, we know that this is a flashback to when Bucky's the Winter Soldier, as he's, like, taking these guys out. This is another nice action scene where it was very kind of, well, not very, like, there's certain instances where certain shots where you're like, what the fuck's kind of going on? But it's a pretty clear action scene, and that's kind of important to me. You don't do an action scene where you are like, I don't know what's going on. The whole point is to show the action. And we see how ruthlessly and effectively the Winter Soldier's taking people out with guns and mostly knives. And he's able to get his target, but then we see that the dude who said he had to go in early was still in the process of getting into his hotel room and didn't make it in as the Winter Soldier kills him. Bucky, of course, wakes up, and we get into the part where he starts talking with his therapist. Let's see. She, of course, wants him to tell her about his nightmare, but according to Bucky, it's not a nightmare, and I don't think that's an inaccurate statement. Because depending upon how Bucky kind of feels about it, it could be just like a memory from another person. Because you've got to delineate between who the Winter Soldier is and who Bucky Barnes is. And he's still trying to kind of reconcile those facts. And of course we get some information here. My biggest kind of criticism for this is the use of the close-up shots on the faces. I think they get too close and are kind of more distracting than more useful here. But we get that Bucky has this mandated by the government. This is one of the conditions of his pardons for everything he's done as the Winter Soldier. And we really get a sense of, like, Bucky's like, no, it's not a nightmare. Oh, God, you're going for the notepad. You're going for the notes. You don't talk. I write notes. And the, like, passive aggressiveness, like, I really get a feeling for Bucky of, like, he's trying to do what he can to, like, right the wrongs and everything, and just is trying to understand himself and his place in this world, because he's 106 years old. And he's like, fine, all right. He's like, well, he then goes to tell her about him trying to make amends on one person, because when he was the Winter Soldier, he got this one woman into pretty much the position of a congressperson. And we see him going through all the steps that the therapist says shouldn't do anything illegal, shouldn't hurt anybody, and she needs to say this whole line about him not being the Winter Soldier and making amends. Well, it's pretty funny because he's able to remote control the car, and this congressperson is trying to pretty much get this dude to, like, actually silence somebody, and he fucks with the car, scares her, and then they put down the window. The dude tries to pull a gun on him. He uses, of course, his vibranium arm to pretty much crush his hand and knock him out. Says he's not the Winter Soldier, says I'm trying to make amends, smiles at her, and then the SWAT and police people come in to take her out, because even though Hydra has been destroyed, she was still using her position corruptly. And it was just a really kind of funny way to juxtaposition him in the therapy session talking about it versus what was going on. And it was just really kind of funny to see him do that kind of stuff, because he had gotten information to her aid to pretty much set that whole thing in motion. And the thing is, the therapist also then brings up, all right, have you talked to anybody lately? He's like, not really. And she's like, give me your phone. And he doesn't have 10 contacts. He's ignoring texts from Sam, which sucks, but it's understandable because they haven't interacted as much. They don't have as big of a relationship as, like, Steve and Bucky had and Steve and Sam had. So that's pretty much the whole thing that's going to happen over this season of these 6 episodes. Seeing how they kind of work together. We've seen them do things in like Civil War and their whole kind of interaction that way. But that's pretty much what we've had at this point. And I'm just thinking to the therapist, lady, I have a lot of contacts in my phone. I only regularly talk to like 3 or so people through my phone. I talk to more people on the internet for other weird things. It's like, yeah, I'm supposed to have 10 contacts? I'm like, what, you're gonna tell them to get like 50 fucking Facebook friends? Alright, do you? Because she's talking about like how she's been a soldier as well, which that's an interesting kind of thing, and that seeing the dead bodies and everything that's happened affects people, and that if you're not careful, you're going to end up alone in like pretty much the quietest, most personal hell. And she's trying to help Bucky not get to that way. We see Bucky then leaves out, and he's pretty much in Brooklyn, and he runs into this older gentleman that he's friends with, Yori, and he's kind of pissed off at this one dude that's pretty much putting his trash in Yori's place. He's like, fuck off with that. So he's like, hey, let's go to this place that we usually go to. I'm buying. And of course, they're talking and everything. We see this pretty waitress behind the counter. She's having a nice banter between them. And then, of course, Yori is able to get a date for Bucky. And they're like, hey, he wants to ask you out. He's like, sure. Tomorrow my shift ends around 10. And he's like, oh, all right. There you go, Bucky. And he then, of course, goes, brings her flowers and everything. She calls it nice and old-fashioned. She's, of course, closing up the shop. And the thing is, we had seen that Yori was talking about his son previously. And he's like, hey, that used to be my son's favorite. And the thing is, he was doing consulting work, and that he didn't know how he died. They weren't able to tell him how he died. And you're like, shit. Well, we see him having his nice date with the lady, and we see that Bucky's... There's this like little kind of like cat thing with that arm, and evidently Bucky doesn't like it moving, so he tries to stop it. And they do a little bit of bantering. She's talking about how he's handling dating. He's like, I tried online dating. I don't even understand half of what I see on there. She's like, man, you sound like my dad. How old are you? 106. He doesn't even like try to. She's like, funny. And they then get into a game of how do I say? Battleship shots. Like if they miss, they take they drink some of their beer. If they hit, I guess the other person drinks some of their beer. But they're of course having a nice little time with the battleship. But she's trying to get him like just get to know him. Typical dating stuff. Talking about how he has a sister. His parents passed away. Of course, she brings up Yori and the kind of difference between like if you lose your parents, you're orphaned. If you lose your spouse, you're widowed. But if you lose your kid, there's no word for that. And of course, this is eating on Bucky, and you're like, what's kind of going on? He's like, excuse me, I gotta go do something. And we see him walk back out, and he goes to Yori's place, and pretty much pays him for the lunch. But we see the there's a funeral shrine in there, and it's got the person that we saw in the Winter Soldier flashback, and this is another person that Bucky is trying to make amends for, but he doesn't. He just says, yeah, it went well and everything, and then just kind of left because he inquired about how the date was going and everything, but like Bucky didn't get to that point to trying to make amends. He's trying to help this guy, and he knows that he's hurting, and he's responsible for that hurt, but he's not. It's just, I know that the dude probably wouldn't look at him the same way, but he would then have closure on what was going on with his son, how he died, why he died, because of Hydra's bullshit, and being pretty much collateral damage. So, now granted, we have seen this being dealt with before with Tony Stark in Civil War, but this is we've got this more focused on Bucky this time, because granted, that was more the secrecy between Steve and Tony and what was going on with Bucky. This time, Bucky is more active in it and is actively trying to make amends, and he's still just trying to figure out how to deal with that. So I'm really kind of looking forward to that, because we've seen 2 bits of that so far. When he actively helps someone, get into a position of power where they could continue fucking people over, and how he was able to rectify that. But then you got the flip side of he has killed someone, and this was just even like collateral. It wasn't like he was even out there to kill this person. How does he make amends for that? How does he go forward with that and keep moving forward with that? So I'm intrigued to see how that kind of works out, and how Bucky and Sam are going to kind of converge on what they're going to be doing, because we didn't see Bucky see what was going on with the newly announced Captain America, because that seems like a catalyst for them to call. Also, Sam would probably want help with dealing with these Flag Smasher people, because they're superpowered, and Sam's just a dude, and Bucky's just a dude, but Bucky, of course, has probably been experimented on, at least to keep his longevity to be a Winter Soldier, and also has a vibranium arm, so you'd kind of want some help on that front as well. So, overall, I really liked how this episode handled that out. Of course, they had a more kind of even composition of flipping back and forth between Sam and Bucky, but it's just kind of easier to kind of group each kind of story together to kind of tell you what's going on. So, I overall really enjoyed this. I would definitely recommend people to watch this if you're into Cap and into his supporting characters and wanting to learn more about them. Definitely if you're into character development. I'm liking the work that they're doing with the character development so far, delving into Sam's family and what he kind of has to do as the kind of superhero that he is, because he wasn't government created like Steve. He wasn't filthy stinking rich like Tony. So how does he kind of get by with everything? And then seeing Bucky deal with his whole past as the Winter Soldier and trying to move forward. So I'm liking these threads, and I'm really excited to see kind of where this all goes. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.